Unemployed and Afraid acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on and of the land where you, the listener, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend our respect to any First Nations, Aboriginal, and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, acknowledging that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the messy middle of being out on your own and starting over with the people who've done it. I'm your host, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into today's story of starting over. Hello, I'm so glad you've chosen to spend some time with me and my awesome guest today to chat about all things starting over, trying new things, and working through the messiness of it all. And that's the deep purpose for bringing you these stories, to be totally real about how messy it is. Naturally, we all want to be inspired by the big stories of change, how everything worked out to be brilliant and exciting, but there's always so much more to it than that. When we're on these journeys of trying to create careers that actually fulfill us, we spend so much time in the vulnerable mess of it all, most of our time really. And sometimes we take big leaps forward only to have to jump right back, make changes and leap forward again. I think it's really important we talk about more of that so we can connect and see ourselves in the stories of others to realize that we're not alone on this journey, that success isn't the accolades and the exciting headlines that we put into our bios or share at parties. It's just backing ourselves enough to keep going. And I feel very #blessed that the guests who so generously share their stories with us on this podcast open up their world so that we can all feel more connected about this stuff, feel more empowered and more hopeful to just do our own thing. And today's story is about getting started, going back and starting again, delving into a passion as a business, then going back to learn from others and from formal education. It's a beautiful example of how you can just get started wherever you are and work through what you need to as you go. There is no perfect business plan or path to these things. My guest today is Marie-Lauren. She's a jeweler making her way in the world with her brand MLR. And we talk in this episode about working through huge change, doubting the right, in quotation marks, next career move, leaning back into your known comfort areas when you're trying something new, struggling to make decisions on what to do next, and stepping into bridging roles to get yourself to that next step. I love how honestly Marie-Lauren shares. There's so much we can all learn from each other's stories, as at the core, we're all going through just slightly different versions of the same thing, starting over. And I hope you enjoy this chat as much as I enjoyed creating it for you. Marie-Lauren Romano is founder of Australian jewellery brand MLR, first created in 2014. The label is an extension of Marie-Lauren, a painter turned jeweller celebrating chaos, beauty, and spontaneity. Each MLR piece is intertextual, influenced by a melting pot of sources from ancient Mediterranean jewellery to innovative street style. And the brand puts the process first, letting the materials inspire the way for each mini sculptural artwork. And I absolutely love that, putting the process first and allowing the journey to unfold exactly as it's meant to. I think you can see why I was looking forward to learning more about Marie-Lauren. We first connected through LinkedIn, where all good connections start, where we shared some thoughts on the challenge of creating a brand that evolves with you, the perception of others while you're on that journey, and swinging back and forth between working for others while creating for yourself. Marie-Lauren, thank you for allowing us to join you in the midst of your creating journey. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Thank you, Kim. That was a nice bio. It sounded lovely.
Oh, yes, thank you.
I still remember when we first connected, I was lying on the beach and you had only published 3 episodes. And it was over summer. And someone must have liked the post on my LinkedIn. And then I literally just listened to the whole 3 episodes and then messaged you straight after.
Oh, thank you for that. That makes my heart swell. I was a bundle of nerves and mess at that time, having just put the pod out into the world. So I'm grateful that you found it, listened, and reached out because, sometimes people don't do the reach out, and I think it's really important.
No, so am I. And I think I was just in a point where I was just wanting to talk to anyone that shared a common story. So it was like perfect timing. It was over summer and I was deciding what I was going to do. And then it just popped up into my feed, which was a good sign.
There's a million quotes that I could pull out, but I'll probably get them all wrong. But, you know, the person you need or the thing that you need to listen to or read or hear often appears just by itself, not when you're looking for it. It just kind of pops up into your body like, oh, hang on a minute, it's exactly what I need.
Yeah, and I like those moments. They're good reminders.
Too. Yeah, me too. So just before we kick into hearing a little bit more about your journey, tell me, how would your best friend describe you?
Okay, so my best friend and I met when we were 9. So we've known each other a really long time. And in many ways, we're really similar, but then in many ways, we're really different. She would probably, well, I would like to think that she would describe me as really loyal and protective. I think she would also say that I am creative and good with putting either outfits together. We will always send each other outfits, especially if we're going to spring racing carnival or something. We'll always send each other like a million videos. And then I think she could also say, because I'm protective, that sometimes I can be probably a little bit too protective, but also just like super caring. So I think anyone that's close to me, I always try to like help them out or keep in contact, or that's just who I am. And I think that's because my mum's that way. She's that person that people will go to if something's happening. And I think I'm a little bit like that.
Well, I'm happy to have you here because, as we were just talking before, I feel like I could just talk to you all day long and share all my inner thoughts and feelings. So how your best friend describes you is definitely a vibe. Tell me, who were you before MLR started to seed in your mind?
So MLR has been a little bit of a journey. There's been many iterations through different phases of my early adulthood. I've always been a creative person. So I started painting. Well, I guess I should go back even further. My mum is an art teacher. So being creative was just always around. Like we always had lots of art books in my house. On school holidays, my friends would come over and mum would have a big thing of clay and she'd just let us go outside and play with clay. She always was that mum that would have little activities for us to do. I also loved, she would take us to this place where you could buy like just plain boxes, and we'd go and pick the box that we liked and buy the paints, and we'd make little jewelry boxes. So I was always creative. I started painting when I was 10, and then I went and studied design at RMIT after I finished school. And that was when I first discovered that you could actually make jewelry as a career. I just had I went to quite a conservative academic school, so creative pursuits wasn't really in the forefront of what you could do after high school. So that's when I first discovered it. But I also was like nervous to have a solely career-driven path. So then I went and studied marketing and was working in advertising after I studied my master's degree, but always was thinking about jewelry. And I did lots of short courses during that time. And then I decided to leave advertising. It would have been 2018. And I took a period of time where I just focused on jewelry. But I don't think I was ready. So at that time, I would have been 27, 28. And I was still super nervous about going out full time. And I don't necessarily think that's the right idea either. We were saying before we started recording that like putting all your pressure on your creative pursuit can be detrimental to actually making work. So then I went back into a marketing position, but only for 4 days to allow myself that chunk of time to work on MLR. But during that COVID period was when I really decided to step into life as a jeweler. So I've kind of done a few different things before I really took MLR seriously, but I feel like they all link into what I'm doing now, all had a purpose before I got to where I am now.
You can always see a little bit in retrospect once you move through some of these sticky points, how the journey has unfolded and why it's unfolded that way. When you first left your advertising career and were stepping into what would become MLR, how did you feel at that stage?
I've felt really torn for the last few years because there's a part of me that is super creative and just wants to like paint and make jewelry. But then there's also a part of me that loves advertising and branding and building campaigns and strategy and working with a client. Like I feel like I'm split in two sometimes. So I always felt paralyzed by the anxiety of making the wrong decision, like which path should I go down? And working in advertising in your early 20s is just so fun because everyone was similar age groups. People were so smart. I was in the digital team. I had 2 managers that were really smart and just very caring in building me after university. I mean, you think you know things, but you don't really know anything when you leave university and you start working. So it was a tough decision for me to leave. And I was working on really good clients. And yeah, just how I was saying, like that split in two. I was like, do I stay in this and climb the ladder, or do I give my own brand a shot? Can I do that? So it was tough. I think I thought about it for a whole year before I actually left that full-time advertising role. So yeah, I didn't take it lightly. And I definitely met some very cool people in that industry. that I still look at what they're doing, and they're just really intelligent, smart people doing really cool campaigns.
I'm going to guess a bit of a feeling because, and you can certainly tell me if I get this wrong, because you and I have somewhat similar backgrounds in the industries that we've worked in and the energy and the people those industries bring into your life. And then when you step out of that space, that high productive, smart, exciting, creative, sometimes status driving career into doing something for your own, there can come a lot of those moments where you're a bit self-doubt on what am I doing? I feel like I've lost a part of my identity here. It's hard to explain to people what I'm doing and feel good about it because I don't have enough proof points yet. Was that a similar journey for you? Did you have any of those moments?
Yeah, 100. I still do. People will say, oh, so what do you do? And it's like, well, I used to work in advertising and I was a marketing manager, but now I make, like, it's the stupidest thing. I just can't say it. I just cannot say what I'm doing. And yeah, just with the way I was brought up, it was not that my parents were like tiger parents, not at all. They were happy with whatever we did, but there was always this like, just pick the safe option because they don't want to see us in any pain, I guess, or any bad situations. So yeah, climbing that ladder, and that's what I saw my dad do. It was like, okay, that's the only real option. So it is a bit of a status or a title thing. I'm going to work on these big clients. I was a suit. So it's like, I'm going to become like a general manager of, a agency, and that's what I'll be doing. But then day to day, the creative element can get really pulled out of what you're doing in an agency. I mean, you create these great end results, but it's a lot of emails, a lot of dry stuff to get to that, one day on set where you're shooting something beautiful. And it just wasn't fulfilling enough for me to stick that out, 40 years or however long we work now till we're 70 or whatever it is. It's like, I don't think I can do this. I don't think this is it for me. So that was kind of where I was at for a while, though. It was still a decision I thought about for ages because there's also a fear that if I step out of it, will I ever be able to get back in if I change my mind? Will I just be like too far gone, or like my gap in my CV will be too big that they won't consider me again? So that fear also drove me staying in advertising and marketing for longer than I probably wanted to.
Yeah, I'm nodding furiously. There's a lot of that I completely resonate with, and I'm sure the listeners will be feeling some of that too. How did you then get to the decision to go, right, I'm going all in with MLR and I'm making the step?
I know this sounds really lame, but it was probably COVID. So this would have been end of 2019, 2020. I was already not super happy in the role that I was in. So I was working as a marketing or brand manager, retail manager for a homewares brand here in Melbourne. And I just wasn't loving the culture there or what I was doing day to day. I didn't feel challenged. And I'm a person that if I'm staying somewhere, I need something new to challenge me, or I need to feel like I'm learning. If I could study full-time, I probably would just study full-time and just like be learning something all the time. So I already felt that way. And then COVID happened, and I get quite anxious with change at the best of times. So that was just a lot of change, and a relationship that I was in broke down. And I feel like relationships breaking down as you get older, you just feel it a little bit more. And then working from home and all you could think about was work. I was like, I just don't like this at all, what I'm doing. And I was just in a bad place, but I would always feel calmer when I was making jewelry. And it's like, if the whole world can literally change in a few months, what's the worst that could really happen? And I would always get really paralyzed by choosing the marketing direction or the jewelry direction. And it's like, how privileged can you be if you're getting worried about which direction you're going to take? Like if you actually have so many choices. So when I flipped that thinking, and I mean, that took a while for me to think about it that way. And I was like, if everything can change so quickly, I'm just going to do it. Because whether it's the world changing or my health or something in my life, I would rather have said, oh yeah, I actually tried to do it. So I left my role. Well, it wasn't as simple as me just leaving my role. I was on a contract, and the contract negotiations didn't really go the way I wanted to. And I already didn't want to stay. I wasn't really in it. I was just trying to like keep a salary for as long as we were in the lockdown. So it just didn't go my way. So I was like, okay, maybe this is a sign. So I stepped away in September of 2021. And again, I still wasn't feeling myself. So that was really hard. But I basically was like, so what am I going to do now? And I just started emailing jewelers that I followed on Instagram and admired, and was really lucky that True said, yeah, you can help out in the lead up till Christmas. And then I was like, okay, I have somewhere to go now. I can get out of the house and get out of my head. And really for the rest of 2021, I was just still making my own stuff on the side, but I was going in and assisting these two jewelers, which just got me out of the house basically, and gave me a few more months to just think about what I was going to do. That was a long answer.
It was an excellent answer. And there is a lot of really interesting thoughts and experiences to unpack there, because there's sometimes the privilege of choice it's a wonderful thing, but it can be quite paralyzing and quite overwhelming, because you can never be completely sure, in my experience, that you're making the right decision. Mm-hmm. And that can stop you from making any decision at all, which means you're kind of, I sort of hate this term, but I can't think of a more relevant one. You're kind of half pregnant in a bunch of things and you just can't be that way.
That is me, because I also am like, if I'm going to do something, I have to do it perfect, which is a stupid way to think, but that's just the way my brain was programmed from a child. And I think as I get older, I realized that that's just a silly way, because then you don't do anything. And I literally write so many lists. I've got lists and lists and lists of things I want to do. And it's like, you just need to do the things. You just stop writing them down. It's like, I can't do it unless I'm like 100% ready and I'm going to do it completely properly. Whereas there are other people I know that just start, and as they're going, they just work it out. So I know I hold myself back, because it's like, I can't do something unless I'm going to do it right, which I shouldn't think that way.
Well, you have a wonderful sense of self-awareness, and I think there is many, many people that can relate to that very thing, because you also don't know what you don't know when you're starting a brand or any kind of creative pursuit, professional business pursuit. You don't really know whether or not you've actually thought about enough before you get started. That's been my experience, is even with the podcast. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I've mapped out the kinds of things I think I want to do. Is that enough? I've got the show vibe, I've got the narrative. Okay, I've written show notes. Okay, I've gotten, some help with the technical side of things. Okay, am I ready? Am I supposed to have a business plan? Am I supposed to have the next 4 or 5 iterations rolled out? And that sort of thinking, I think, happens no matter the pursuit that you're in. You're like, great, I've got a website. Okay, so now what do I need? And it's those little steps that can actually hold you back. But you did put yourself out there. You created MLR, so you created the brand, and I imagine that was a fun experience, just given your background, just kind of creating a brand and the visuals and the brand tone and the vibe. I imagine that was really exciting, and you did put product out there. And I'm interested in that feeling and that experience of hitting go live. I'm doing quotation marks for those who can't see us, because it's like, when is actually go live when you've got your creative pursuit? It's like, is it when somebody looks at it, or is it when I talk about it, or is it when I hit live on the website? What is it? But for you, what was that moment, and what happens in terms of the sales?
Yeah, so there's been a few websites that I've built, and what was the very, very first one I made in like 2014 was on Wix, and it didn't even have e-com. It's literally just like a portfolio that I put together. I've still got screenshots of it. It was so bad. And then I just got into Shopify, and I've done I think I'm up for version 3 and in the process of doing version 4 of a Shopify website. But yeah, I love building a brand around what I do. So I never want to be, and it's still a work in progress, I don't want to be a person putting out jewelry. I feel like there are many of those. And I need to remember that Melbourne is a bubble of creatives. There are so many talented people here, but I feel like a lot of people are just posting jewelry without a brand wrapping around that product. And I would like to be the person that wraps a brand or a meaning around what I'm doing, just to give it a more of a cohesive message and have that brand story running through the product, or vice versa. Like, if you saw a product, you would recognize that it came from me, not just another, signet ring that's been put into the world with no real brand message around it or something that it stands for. But yeah, it felt really lovely. I think my favorite memories about when I first hit live on a website and started making all the custom pieces, like people messaging me on Instagram saying, oh, could you do this? And I've made probably the most special pieces are two of my friends from high school. Their husbands asked me to make their wedding bands. I was like, oh, this is really cool, like that someone would trust me with such a sentimental piece of jewelry. So they're the stories that I really like and will always be a part of the business that I want to build, that custom side of things, because of the stories. Those orders are more time consuming, but when someone reaches out and is, I've made an engagement ring, a few wedding bands, like if someone is willing to trust me with that, and I feel like I'm still learning this craft, that is like my push to keep doing it, I guess, and keep updating the Shopify websites so that more people can find me, or like putting time into social media, which is basically where most of my customers come from.
There's a couple of things there that you touch on that I want to look back in on, but the first one is, I'm curious, how many times have you rewritten your brand strategy?
Oh, so many times. And I have them all. I moved house in March and I found a box of stuff, and I had my original logo. I had just literally got a black texter and just filled a piece of paper with like different logos and had scanned it in. I found all of that stuff and I'm going to keep it. It's so funny. But the most recent time I did a business plan, I had never written myself a full business plan. And I did that. I started it in last September or October. Pretty soon after I left my full-time job, it might have been October, I started writing one, a full competitor analysis, which took me like did it so in depth. That's just like true to my personality. I feel like I looked at so many brands, and I finished it in February of this year, and I was working with a mentor at the time, and they were like, you just need to finish it, because I was going through it so many times. They're like, I've never had anyone take so long to put this together, because it's like I can't do something until I feel like I know what I'm doing, but you're never going to know everything. But yes, I have rewritten it so many times. I've rewritten the copy for my website so many times.
Oh, amen.
Yeah, my sister is quite a good writer, so she's proofed it for me. I have another friend who was a producer for Channel 9. She read it for me during COVID because she had some time off. It's like I've rewritten it many times, and I'm rewriting it again right now.
I think a lot of people will relate to this, because sometimes we use those skills that we develop over years, whether you've been in marketing, advertising, brand strategy, no matter what career you might have done before you start to make a change, you do tend to go back to that skill set as an area of comfort, to be like, well, if I'm doing this work, it is the business. I'm still working on the business. But I find it a really interesting area, because it's certainly where I go to when I'm feeling like I want to change, and then I'm feeling confident I'm going to step into this new phase of whatever the creative pursuit or the business pursuit is that I'm doing. I'm like, great, I'll go and I'll review the copy, and I'll think about the brand message, and I'll think about the bio and how that lands. And that toiling work is so important, but it's also, I think, a way of us going back into that comfort zone, as opposed to going into the doing.
It's my busy work. It's like, okay, I'm too nervous to put my new designs out, so I'm going to just rebrand. I'm just going to rebrand, and I enjoy it as well. Like, I love it. But yeah, I'm literally doing that at the moment, which I do think is necessary, because I haven't updated anything since 2018, and where I want to be now is in a different space, a more like gender inclusive space. And I have had many males ask me for rings, so I want to be making more male rings. But yeah, I'm working with an awesome graphic designer, and I'm doing my own copy and Shopify. And so yeah, I'm doing that again now, but I feel like I need to do it this time. But yeah, it's my busy work, because I do love it, and that's where I feel the most comfortable. I guess still, even though I've been making for a while, that's still where I feel more credible, I guess. Like, I can actually say that I am good at this, or that I can do this because I worked in the industry, I studied this. It's that whole mentality.
Credibility, that the word you just used there, it makes me feel credible, is, I think, the perfect word for that, and those spaces that we go to because we can doubt our credibility so much in the creation process or whatever it is that we're doing, because we're so visible doing these things in life as well. And it's, to be able to rock up at a party and kind of explain what you do, it's, that's kind of what we look for in that moment. And finding those pockets of credibility to others is, I think, something that a lot of us experience through that stage.
And I think since stepping into jewelry studios in the last 6 months, makes me realize that the more I know, the more, what's that saying? The more I know, I don't know. So then since being around more jewelers, I feel even more self-conscious about posting my work. Whereas I feel like in the early days, I used to post everything because I was like, oh, this is all new and fun. And like, look what I did today. But now I'm way more critical of what I'm doing because I'm around jewelers that have been, jewelers for 15 years, however long. So I'm even more critical of what I'm doing. So I fall back into my marketing brand hat even more. Like, I'm going to write a TikTok strategy now. I'm going to do this.
Oh, relatable.
I look at my work and I'm like, oh, there's so much I still have to learn.
I think we all feel that way. I can certainly relate to that in the world of ceramics. It's, I haven't been in this game for very long and, I don't even like to call it a game. I haven't been in this creativity bubble for very long. And, I look at things and the more I learn about the craft, the more I just like what I make.
Yeah,
and I'm surprised when I get compliments. I'm like, no, but look at this. Look what's wrong with this. It's terrible.
Yeah, that's me.
But it is absolutely all part of the story. And I like that you share that you ebb and flow with creation and creation being encapsulated of actually making, but also creating brand strategies and business plans. Business, is definitely an art form as well. So I like that you go with back and forth between working with others and working for yourself. What prompted you to write the business plan in the first place?
I think I was still trying to legitimize making the move. And I felt like if I put it all on paper, it made it a little bit more real. I've written business plans for many other people, like brand strategies for people, but never for myself. And I had never done a budget or a forecast. Numbers is not me. I'm okay at it, but putting it all on paper, I had never done. And I just felt like, okay, I've left my job. I need to legitimize this. And I think it was also a part to be like to my parents, oh yeah, look, this is my whole plan type thing. Even though I'm 32, I still felt like I needed to do that. I felt like, putting it down on paper made it more professional or something. When really, like, you just need to do it. I think you just need to like put one foot in front of the other and just start doing little things. And the biggest thing is the product, because if there's no product, then what are you showing people? So I feel like a lot of that energy could have gone into that. But at the time, when I was still trying to work out what I was doing, that's what I thought was the best decision to write it down.
And how are you feeling about it now that it's in paper? Has it given you more confidence?
I have not read it again. I did love looking at competitors both here and overseas. It was overwhelming because there's so many amazing jewelers in the space that I would like to be in. And the exercise was a good exercise, but I do not look at it at all. I just look at my list of things to do, my Asana list, and work out what I need to be doing for the next day, or never really far in advance.
I love that you have an Asana list. That's definitely the advertising person in you coming out, the project management side, and they go, okay, what are all the things that need to happen and what's the critical path of activity and the key milestones? And it's definitely easy to fall back into those spaces. Easy or awkward. I think sometimes they feel a little bit more uncomfortable for me these days.
Like my security blanket. It's like if I have these tools still, I'm still working and still, being productive.
Yeah. The busy work. I liked how you described it that way. So in terms of redefining MLR now, so you mentioned that, yes, you've looked at your brand strategy and also what you're wrapping around what you're creating and what you're standing for. Where did you start with that redefinition?
I think I really looked at my custom orders and who was coming to me for a piece, and me being naive, even if a male would approach me, I would just automatically assume that the piece was for their girlfriend. But then they weren't. It was for themselves. And then through the competitor analysis, I realized there's a big gap for jewelry for males that doesn't look like Bali jewelry, if that makes any sense. There are many male-focused brands that are selling rings, which I feel have popped up in the last maybe 5 years, that this whole trend of males wearing more rings. But I felt like the brands that I would want to be, I guess, or look at and say, I would wish I was like that brand, we're really marketing to women only. So my aesthetic from a product point hasn't changed. The way I design hasn't changed, but the way I want to shoot and the messaging will be more inclusive to anyone than being more female focused, which is, I have always just shot with females. When I've done little shoots with stylists, it's always been more of a feminine direction, whereas now if I were to do a shoot, I would want it to be more inclusive of both sexes, or everyone. And the narrative is not going to be at all feminine. And I'm not a girly girl at all. But for some reason, every time I would shoot the jewelry, it was like that whole Instagram neutral little flowers, like that whole vibe. But that's not who I am anyway. So yeah, I think that doing the business plan helped me define that space that I wanted to be. So that did come out of it. And I'm working on new pieces, so that's informed the balance. There are some still very fine, dainty pieces. But I mean, if a guy wants to wear it, it doesn't bother me. Just wear what you like. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's so interesting that you touch on the aesthetic that you adopted in shooting your jewelry and the potential that may have come from the echo chamber of good old #Instagram. Mm-hmm. And all the things that we get used to seeing from successful brands, and the temptation is there to imitate, even if it's not an active, explicit temptation that we're acknowledging and going, oh, I'm going to shoot it like this. It comes out in the styling, and you tend to forget a little bit about yourself through that process. It's a really interesting perspective.
I think that we consume so much that we don't even realize that we're doing it. So I have to be like, do I actually really like that? I need to remind myself. And even like millennial pink, I will never have pink in my color palette. I'm reworking my color palette now. And even the color palette I have, it's all bold colors, and they're my favorite colors: turquoisey blue, a coral red. So they're not on trend colors. I just like things that are bold, I guess. And that comes across in the gemstones that I select, color combinations, and the design aesthetic. Well, my design aesthetic is quite heavily influenced by Roman jewelry. I just do what I like, I guess. But yeah, the Instagram world can definitely come in, and I have to pull back and say, no, that's not right. I have to have more of a lens, like what I would have done if I was working for another client, just saying, no, that's not right. Or instead of just doing what I saw was getting lots of likes, or, the trend of the time.
The thing that often gets lots of likes is the thing that people feel comfortable viewing because they've seen it before, or it's, oh yeah, that's something like I've seen before. That's good. That someone else has liked or has shared with me. So now I know it's good. It's safe enough to like. It's a really dangerous space to be in. And when you're creative and you're trying to create something for yourself, is that recognition that comes from the things that maybe aren't exactly what you meant to do. That can be a really dangerous place to be. And I think it's very brave to look at that and to acknowledge that and realize that that may have been a space that you were going in to find that credibility for yourself, to fit in, to make it fit into the world that you're seeing.
When I started, it was 2012, 2014, that time. So Instagram was new. So I was just following whatever other people were posting. Whereas now I think people see through that, because Instagram's been around for a lot longer. So people pick up on the trends, and it's just like a big whitewash of the same stuff.
It's so true. And it is really hard to grow a brand on Instagram these days. And I don't think that there is a platform that replaces it. And I'm not completely convinced that TikTok is great for brand building in terms of products, but I'm very interested to be schooled in that area because it's a growing space.
So when it comes to social media, which is my only form of marketing at the moment, I would love to get some PR in there or work with a stylist that could place my pieces. But Pinterest I just use because I'm obsessed with it, and that's just my pin board, and it's not original content. It's just, curating. Instagram, I agree with you. I think that's where the brand story comes to life. And TikTok, I got into TikTok in the very last Melbourne lockdown, and it's so addictive, but I use that more as like showing me and process stuff versus brand. Because I agree, I haven't seen a brand do it really well. It's all process, which it's part of a brand, but it's not the brand. It's, people working in their warehouse or, doing those things, and people have become fascinated with people packing orders. But I think having your clear brand message, it's not the same as you can convey on Instagram, where it's more of the story, and you can mix both in. And Facebook, it's just like, I don't even do anything on Facebook anymore.
I started a Facebook page for Unemployed and Afraid the other day, only because I quite literally had to do it in order to access some kind of scheduling activity. And I was like, oh, for God's sakes, get me out of the cycle.
I've got a page there, but I literally forget about it. And it was the same. I had to do it because everything's linked. If Facebook and Instagram are so linked.
What I do love about Facebook is the potential for community. And I think that's a really exciting space. So I'm always on the hunt for what is going to be the next place where
where we can have more effective conversation with customers, with partners. So yeah, if anyone is listening and is like, Twitter Spaces or this thing or that thing, please hit me up, because I'm keen to learn, because I think building a community is just the funnest thing you can do. But bring us back to something else you mentioned, which is you made the decision to go back into work. And I think this is a very exciting space to explore, because I think often when we step outside of the full-time career cycle and look to create something for ourselves, there's the natural challenge of finances, of self-doubt, of setbacks, of opportunities. It ebbs and flows and backs and forths. So you mentioned that you went back and you are now working for jewelers. So quite different to your advertising gig that you left in the first place. Tell me how that came about.
So when I first left, I messaged some, how you have your Instagram friends that you just comment, I would reach out to every now and again. And I just said, do you need any help in the lead up to Christmas? And there were two lovely girls. So Ada Hodgson, she works in Melbourne too. So I was working with her like 3 or 4 days, just helping her pack or update her Shopify or helping her on the bench a tiny bit. And also Georgie and Ali at Lyndon Cook said, yeah, you can come in and just help us clean stuff up in the lead up to Christmas, because they were super busy. And I just like being in a team studio, because it can be really isolating just working on your own all the time. And then I also decided that I would go back to school, because I have never formally trained as a jeweler. I've just done lots of short courses, and there are so many different techniques. And the technique that I use is called lost wax casting. And it's basically you start carving your piece into wax, and then it goes through a casting process where the wax is dissolved and the metal replaces that mold, I guess, is the easiest way to describe it. And it's a super old technique from Egyptian era, which is why I love it, because of that whole story of how it came to be. But then there are ways, when you think of a more traditional engagement ring, it's all hand forged from a piece of silver or an ingot of metal, whatever your metal choice is. And I had never been privy to the way of making in that technique. So I decided that I would go back to school, which is an apprenticeship model. So I started in May, and I was lucky enough to just be signed on with a jeweler here in Melbourne called Blackfinch as an apprentice. So I'm with them 4 days, and they make engagement rings, but not like your traditional diamond engagement rings, which is good for me because I like learning about stones as well. So they use a lot of Australian sapphires, which are really beautiful, and they set everything in-house. So that's a major skill. Learning how to set is a trade in itself. In any other country but Australia, they consider it to be the same trade. So yeah, I've only been there a few weeks, but it's been really lovely to be in a space where they're doing something that I really don't know much about and just learning. And then I go to school for an intensive week every 6 to 8 weeks, which is good. I don't think I could go back to school full time, but I still feel a need to have that formal training under my belt. And it's more of a confidence thing. When I was going through the apprenticeship process, I emailed so many jewelers that I admired from Instagram, and so many are self-taught and have these amazing businesses. But for me, for some reason, I just feel that I need that training before I can really call myself a jeweler. Like, I still can't say it. I just say I'm an artist because I have painted for so many years, like my whole life. I feel more comfortable saying that than a jeweler. So yeah, hopefully over the next few years, I feel more comfortable doing that. It's quite different to where I was at the start of the year, where I was just focused on MLR. And I was rebranding, working with this graphic designer. I've got a whole collection of stuff upstairs that I still haven't released, to then deciding to go back to school. It's been a busy 6 months of just like working it out. But I feel much more comfortable now and not as nervous or scared about the decision. I feel like it's come together.
You're trusting your instincts to go through it. And we should always be learning. We should always be chasing more education in whatever the field is that we're looking at. But yeah, going in to work for others and learn from others and find those connections. We often look for that kind of perfect thing, that perfect adjacent career or financial structure that's going to just help us do the thing that we need to do. Was that a challenge for you, though, thinking about the finances and how you were going to balance everything?
Oh, yeah. I still worry about it. But when I first left, it was overwhelming, like worry, writing down everything that I would need to pay for, all the rest of it. But I feel like, look, my salary is by no means what I was earning in marketing as an apprentice. For some reason, apprentices, you need to be like 16 to really be fine on the salary, but I make it work. And I was lucky enough to have some savings, and I don't have a mortgage or anything like that. So I'm okay. I'm not saving, but it works out. And I think the scariest part was thinking about it. Once you're actually doing it, it's okay.
Yep, I hear you on the overthinking and how scary that can be. What scares you the most now about working on your brand?
I think I still get nervous about putting things into the world, and not so much the general public, but other jewelers seeing the work and being like, oh, what is this? I'm more worried about what other jewelers think than the general public and customers, and also building a brand that I can envision and to the scale that I envision, because that's another area that I always think about is how do you scale a handmade product? And my handwriting, I guess you could call it, is so integral to the product. It's tricky to understand how you could scale it to the level that I would like to be. The dream is to be fully sustained by MLR and be able to have a small team. I by no means want a big team, but, you know, a small store / studio that I can have people come into for appointments, see some pieces and try it on, because jewelry is such a tactile product. I feel like people need to try it on. In the past, I've done design markets and I just love talking to people. So the dream would be to have a space, but you need to be selling a lot of jewelry to be able to afford the overheads that come with the space and a team. So how do you scale the product and keep the quality and my handwriting? Because you would have to release some control over elements of the business if you wanted to grow. So I think about that a lot.
I like that you ended that without saying that you have a solution and that you are in the ambiguity of it all, because it's absolutely fine to live in the ambiguity stage, because without that, you never get to the other side. I think we don't place enough attention or enough grace on ourselves to just live in that space and be like, I don't have all the answers. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm asking the right questions and the answers will come. Marie-Lauren, what a fantastic adventure you've been on already. And you have just put yourself out there and trying things and retrying things and challenging yourself. And you've got just a wonderful self-awareness on the journey, which I think is really important for us all to have, just to look back and be like, well, I did that thing and then that thing didn't feel right anymore, so I changed it again. And I don't know how to explain it to anyone else, but I'm doing it. So good on you for bringing that energy to the pod, because that's exactly what we're all about. But as we get to the end of our time together, I'd love to know, how can the listener and I support you on your journey moving forward?
So at the moment, my website is kind of under construction, but I would love for people to subscribe to the email list. There's a little sign up section on the website, and I guess just on Instagram. So it's just at MLR_. They're probably the two main channels. I mean, I'm on TikTok, but it's more just me mucking around and trying to work it out and just watching kids, I guess. But yeah, Instagram and the website, signing up, because when the website's all fresh and updated, I will definitely be sending EDMs out.
Fantastic. I'll make sure to put the links to your Instagram and to your website and the sign up space in the show notes, so that the listener can have a look at your pieces and follow your journey as you go into this next stage, as we get towards the end of this podcast and I lose my ability to speak. Thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure to hear about your journey.
Thank you, Kim. It was so lovely to be here.
If this show is supporting you, please consider supporting me right back by dropping a star rating and review on Apple or Spotify. And if you have an idea for an amazing guest you think should share their story, please send me an email to kim@goodsideofthebed.com. Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the stories of starting over with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you liked the episode and are keen to hear more, please hit the follow button and leave a review. And let's keep the conversation going on Instagram @unemployedandafraid, where there's more goodies and links to today's show notes. See you there.